We're now going to consider appropriations to the Minister for Community Affairs. HCA 27, Policy Advice and Support for the Minister for Community Affairs, $1,111,987 in 2020, $1,121,302 in 2021. Are there any questions? Member for Northside.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if the minister could give me an undertaking that included in the 2020 and the 2021 budget is a development officer for Northside.
Happy to give him that undertaking, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any other questions on the vote, on the ministry.
Members of the opposition, or the remainder of the opposition? No questions.
Just a query, Mr. Oh. I was questioning what kind of officer the member from Northside had mentioned.
They have what they call development officers. They've been in existence for at least a decade.
Community development officer?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, yeah, all right.
Member for Newlands?
Not really a lot of questions on my part, Mr. Chairman, just to point out that I do have concerns still with how we're managing relationships between landlords and the department in terms of getting landlords registered, getting payments to them on time and so on. I know we're not going to solve that problem overnight, but if we could get some indication of what is being done to address that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the member for the question. I'll ask the Chief Officer Echenike, to address it.
Good afternoon, Teresa Echenike, Chief Officer for the Ministry of Community Affairs. Through you, Mr. Chair, as it relates to timely payments and the relationship building with our landlords, that is a aspect of the work at NAU that is being developed. I am very, very pleased to see that based on the direct deposit program that is now in place, the landlords are able to have their funds directly placed into their account. There's no delays in terms of them having to go and pick up the check from the NAU department, except in the event that they choose not to go with the direct deposit. It would be remiss of me to not take this opportunity to extend my thanks and appreciation to the staff of NAU, the director and her staff, for doing a fabulous job with regards to the relationship building that they have established with the landlords and with moving the direct deposit process forward.
Thank you. And I have to agree. I just want to say I've been working closely with a lot of members of the departments and so on, and you know, they work under very difficult circumstances, very stressful, very demanding, but I've never had an incident where I had to complain about the attention being given to my constituents. So I really want to say thank you to everyone involved for doing a fantastic job under very difficult circumstances.
Mr. Chairman, I too would like to place on record my appreciation to the Chief Officer, and particularly, because I don't know all their names, but I do know Ms. Tamara and Ms. Mendoza, and these are officers that I happen to speak to often. You know, being the speaker is one thing, but I do have a constituency that has needs, and of course, the wider community. And as the last member just saying, there's not a time that, even on weekends, I can call those officers and they will attend to the matter as soon as was possible and get results. And the truth is, the government is inundated with requests of all kinds, particularly NAU. I just don't know how they're managing, because not everyone is appreciative as we are of the department and these officers doing the kind of work that they do. Sometimes I must say, well, I know Ms. Mendoza because she comes from my district, West Bay. If I saw Ms. Tamara now, if she's behind me, I don't know who she is. But I know the work they do. Is she from Georgetown Central? No. I know where she's from, but no matter where she's from, is the person I'm talking about. And I just think that we need to be appreciative of the work of these officers. Sometimes the public is not. Sometimes the complaints that we get back, and that we should not, members need to understand this, we should not jump in where the public is complaining all the time, because we know the work that these people have to do to get and service our constituents. So I just want to place on record my appreciation.
Thank you, sir. Members, member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to echo some of the comments I've heard from the other members so far in respect to the hard work of the NAU and the Ministry for Community Affairs in respect to the many Caymanians who are in need in this country. But I want to see if I can focus some of my questions about the budget for an area that I think the Premier has, as well as the rest of the members of this administration, highlighted to be a very severe issue. And it goes to the issue of housing assistance. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, I see that the government has budgeted for rental accommodations for persons in need to be $1.885 million in 2020 and $1.890 million in 2021. What my concern is, Mr. Chair, is that. Say again? Forgive me, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, unfortunately, due to the way they have had the transfer payments, I've had to ask for the information as to how they outlined the payments for rental accommodations and requests directly from.
Member from Georgetown Central. You're asking about TP 87, I believe, and we're on HACA 27. Are you going to be questioning others? Because I had indication from the opposition bench that they were prepared to approve the vote here in block. If we're going to get you asking in specific sections, then that has to fall away. And,
well, Mr. Chair, if we're going to vote in block, I think it would make sense to allow us those questions that would come up in those other areas in the early parts, unless you want to go through each line item by line item. That's totally the call of this committee.
I think really what I'll do then is I'll just go through and just take each item by line. If you have got nothing to add, then just indicate to me, and we'll just take it one line at a time. Okay? Pardon, sir? I was just going to put it together and read everyone as in straight, but let's just go through line by line. All in favor of HSA 27, policy advice and support.
Mr. Chair, I haven't finished with my question in respect to that line item yet, sir.
Okay, well, please proceed, member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can the minister say whether there's been any policy advice as to increase in the services necessary to assist Caymanians who were in need over the last 2 years before this budget?
Mr. Chairman, every budget we brought has seen an increase in overall funding for indigents, seamen, veterans, persons in need of housing assistance, the full bit. So that is based on the advice and submissions which we receive from the ministry and the department.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, the Premier has said many times in this Honorable House, particularly to my colleague just last evening, about why don't we give offers to the solutions of these problems. I want to remind him of when we've made solutions about trying to fix this problem that they have now, and they said our approach was unaffordable and impractical, referring to a motion from 2017 about this housing problem. Now we see, Mr. Chair, when I asked him about the policy advice, he's willing to take the policy advice of the specialist involved, which he should, but I think it's unfair for him to accuse us of not offering solutions when we did. He ignored them and now come back today and say it's a national issue when we told him about that in 2017. So the question was that policy advice given to him in 2017 exactly around the same time when members of the opposition gave him the same advice that the housing problem was imminent?
Mr. Chairman, I really would like this to be a productive meeting and not a situation where what we have is political arguments back and forth. Because if that is going to be the case, I will refer back to my budget policy statement and we can go into the detail of the considerations the government has had when it developed this budget. This budget, Mr. Speaker, there's never been a budget in the history of the Cayman Islands that has provided more under the heading of community affairs. Mr. Chairman, I can start by going through the list again of the various areas where we have sought to increase the benefits to people who need it most, the most vulnerable in this community. And if that is the line that the member for Georgetown Central wants me to take, I can assure him I am more than happy to start that debate over again this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will respect the wishes of the Premier and allow me to be specific to the line item that's in this budget and the next line item that's coming up, because there it talks about the approval of temporary assistance and the numbers. So we can go through the numbers itself if he's saying that I'm being political. So I'll wait till the next line item to ask the same question.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of questions, but I don't want to get into all of these too much. I believe unless the Premier going to increase them anyway. My focus is going to be on the little place in East End, the home, Sunrise Cottage. Must be one of those moments in my life. Senior or junior or something. We had, the Premier had agreed with me subsequent to me writing him about the need to have this home. And then I visited with the Chief Officer and with Mr. Harris, and we looked at a number of properties in East End. I know the Premier wasn't overly excited about putting it so far from the district, which I'll concede that one. But I haven't, that is in Winter's land. He didn't want to do that. I'll concede that. I still believe that's a nice place to put it, but so be it. And I haven't heard anything per se since as to what has progressed with it.
Member Feaston, I mean, I didn't hear, was there a question that you asked?
The progress on the, because the chief.
We can answer it. We can answer it.
Okay,
Okay.
fair enough.
I'll ask, because I haven't been involved in the actual discussions. There have been considerable discussions going on about the way forward. I'll ask the chief officer to give an update on the progress that is being made.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we understand and we appreciate the needs within the Eastern District to have such a facility available. We do not want to be overly hasty because we don't only want to meet the needs today, but we also want to address our future needs and demands. What we have been doing over the past few months, we've been having meetings and we've been exploring the options that might be available to us as it relates to the building of a purpose-built facility. I'm happy to keep, through the Honourable Premier, the member up to date as we continue to progress. As it relates to the existing structure, we have had discussions with another entity to assist us with some minor remodeling so that we're able to utilize that particular building for community activities and arts and craft programs for our aging population in the Eastern District.
Mr. Chairman, I know that the Leader of the Opposition knows this is how I feel, but just for the broader listenership, my view is that the Eastern Districts need their own retirement home. It is really disconcerting to older people in particular when you move them too far away from things with which they are familiar. And so to have to take Eastenders or Northsiders for that matter and put them in the Golden Age home in West Bay is a real huge change. And those things often hasten the demise of older people. So I am absolutely committed to us trying to find the right property and develop a facility for the Eastern Districts.
Mr. Chairman, I thank the Premier for publicly stating that. Like he says, I know his position, which he has taken for a very long time. And my involvement does not necessarily mean that it has to be situated in East End proper, because we need to have something for Bodden Town, which this one has served for many years. We need for East End, Bodden Town, North Side. But I still haven't heard if we're talking about identifying the piece of property. I mean, what is the time frame for us? Has there been any plans for a time frame for us to have a place? Because people are asking me, not only East End, Northside and Bodden Town are asking me about this. And I'm sure my colleagues have been asked about it as well.
Through you, Mr. Chair, at this point, we do not have a set time frame. We are in discussions with an overseas company who is interested in partnering with us. However, that is only one of the options that are available to us. We are also exploring our own options where we would consider building a purpose-built facility. So we're looking at both of the options to see what would be most cost-effective and what would meet the needs of our people. With that in mind, we're hoping that we will be able to look at both of the options within the first quarter of next year so that we can then start to make some final decisions.
Mr. Chairman, far be it from me to dictate how the government operates its policy. But may I respectfully suggest that we scratch anything from overseas. Caymanians don't want that. They want their own to be in charge, especially for the older ones. I am sure we have seen the many reports in recent times about what those overseas people and how they treat our own people. In my view, there is absolutely no need to have assisted living, if that's what it's going to be called, being run by somebody from outside this country, especially in the eastern districts. Do that in Georgetown, West Bay, and come on back, but not the 3 districts that make up the eastern districts. That is not their way. That is not how they want to be remembered. I know government has to make decisions based on the most efficient and effective way of doing things, but we can do that. So I would respectfully suggest we scratch that one right now.
Member for Borden Town West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the Premier. One of the things I remember hearing from the ministry before was getting rid of the term poor relief payments and also the use of the word indigent. And I strongly believe that words matter. And I would very much like to see the government move to a policy where we don't refer to people as indigents or we don't refer to payments as like poor relief payments or anything like that, because at the end of the day, it has certain negative connotations with it. And I believe ultimately as a people in the country, that's a responsibility that we have to allow our people, regardless if we have to help them or not, to receive some level of assistance with some level of dignity. So I would really like to hear what the government view is on that concept, and if that is something that they're willing to entertain. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have indeed started to look at a difference in terminology, and that will also come into effect as we move forward with the implementation of the financial assistance law. These are pieces in terms of terminologies, in terms of legislation that will continue to develop as we continue to grow our services and grow our programs. But I totally agree with you, sir.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chairman, can the government tell us if there's a set long-term policy or long-term strategy paper that deals with, I guess, the growing needs in terms of what the community or what the community needs would be? And the reason why I'm raising this point, Mr. Chairman, just to kind of put the question in context, when you look at the pension law, which is roughly the private sector pension law, which is roughly 20 years old, and when you're looking at a 10% annual contribution, it basically means it takes 10 years for a person to save 1 year's salary, and then 20 years for those who would have been retiring now, would have been around only 20 years worth of pension, which is 2 years worth of salary. And when you factor in the financial crisis of 2008 and the impact that it had on many people's retirement funds, it would mean then that there'll be more people coming on board that would basically be needing assistance. So the question in all of that is there like a long-term plan where we're looking at Cayman aging population, we're looking at our fertility rate, we're looking at our dependency ratio to say, well, these are the kind of events that we should be probably planning for in terms of what a long-term issue would be. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we are indeed looking at those aspects. Ideally, we would love to say we have a 5-year strategic plan in place. The reality is that based on the nature of our job, we're constantly having to review almost every year because of the changes in our social structure, and the needs of our people are continuously changing. So we don't want to be presumptuous in any way, or we don't want to assume 5 years ahead, but we want to look at the immediate needs of our people and continue to view on an annual basis. But yes, indeed, the heads of my department are giving regular feedback to the ministry, and we are looking at the immediate needs of our people and how we can address their needs now, as well as far ahead as we can, but not moving too fast, because we recognize the importance of us continuing to review to definitely be in a position to meet their needs.
Mr. Chairman, the other piece of that, which is often missed, although I don't think missed by the member from Bordentown West, I think he gets it, is this. And I'm not being facetious, I mean that. He does. The other piece of that is this. Without us addressing this issue about pensions for private sector people, the strain on government going forward is going to become unbearable, financially, I mean. And the other part of that is we have to really continue to work hard for government to save money so that there is money available to deal with many things, but in particular social issues. And we have to keep a strong economy so that government is able to derive the revenue it needs to be able to fund these things. And we have to continue to strive for as close to total employment as we can, so that people have, or more people have the ability to look after themselves. All of these things fit together. We can't expect that you can take policy decisions which restrict government revenue, which increase unemployment, and then government is still going to have the wherewithal to help those who need it most. So it's important that we look at the whole picture, which, as I said, I know that the member from Bordentown West, because he's demonstrated in his house more than once, gets that in a way that some other members just don't.
Thank you, Premier. Just through you, Mr. Chairman, and I will say this much. When we look at our fertility rate, which is roughly 1.85, when we look at our Cayman independency ratio of roughly 50%, and that's one of the things I think we need to really take into consideration. The last time we had a natural Caymanian dependency rate of 50% was around 1979, 40 years ago. Because once you start taking out the number of work permits and the expatriate community and look at just the Caymanian community by itself, these are alarming numbers. And what I want to say is that this is not a political problem. This is not a government versus opposition problem. This is actually a Caymanian problem. And with that said, we are willing to work with the government in that regard to find a solution, because this is not a 2-year, 4-year type issue. This is a 10, 15, 20-year issue, and we are committed on this side to work to find a solution and not to have this issue become a political one.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman? This side. Go ahead. I know it's strange. In addition to a question to the Chief Officer, through you, Mr. Chairman, in addition to the permanent financial assistance uplift that has been increased year on year for those most vulnerable, including 2020 and 2021, I wonder if the ministry can tell us if there are any other advantages or benefits that are under consideration that may be delivered to those most vulnerable.
Member, please go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the uplift to the PFA is definitely going to prove beneficial because we know cost of living is a concern for everyone. So we're most grateful to the uplift that the PFA recipients will be receiving. In addition to the uplift itself, we were able to increase the cap. So we're able to add additional persons that will be viewed as eligible. With that in mind, right now, we have persons, not to disadvantage them, we have them receiving temporary assistance. We're able then to move them from the temporary assistance to the permanent financial assistance if they are qualified. That opens room for us to utilize, to better utilize the funding that is in the temporary services for those persons that are in need of short-term assistance. And I take this opportunity to indicate that the goal and the responsibility of this ministry and my entities are not only to assist persons from a financial perspective, but to truly help them grow and develop and empower them so that they are no longer on our system, but can be very independent and be able to function on their own. So the benefit of the uplift for PFA has a trickling effect, and we're most grateful to be able to have within this budget an uplift to the PFA and the positive impact that it'll have on other areas as well.
All in favor of HCA 27, policy advice and support to the Minister for Community Affairs, $1,111,987, $1,111,987 in 2020, and $1,121,302 in 2021. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. Ayes have it. HCA 28, Administration of Community Assistance Programs, $2,945,884 in 2020 and $3,028,203 in 2021. Are there any questions? Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to see if I can start over fresh again, because I don't want this to be too political, because I have a genuine concern here. And I asked the minister, and I guess his chief officer, to take a look at page 73, where it says the number of clients approved for temporary assistance.
Yes, sir.
And it's increasing from the number of 800 to potentially 800 to 1,000. And what my genuine concern, and this is, I'll beat you up another time, Premier, but genuinely speaking, we budgeted in 2018 and 2019 to help people with temporary housing assistance for $1.9 million each year. We came back to this Honorable House, got supplementary funds that equivalated to up to $3 million for each one of those years. We've recognized that there's a housing problem because the shortages of houses, which the supply and demand has forced the prices of those houses and the rental costs up. So one would have think that you'd at least budgeted for the $3 million based on the last 2 years. We didn't do that. We've actually budgeted less than what we did in 2018 and 2019. So I don't understand how we were expected to meet that demand when we've actually budgeted less than what we had before at those 2 years. We actually had to come back for supplementary funds, unless we're just saying that we're preparing to come back to this house. Why don't we budget for it now? I don't quite understand. Maybe the chief officer can explain why we're only budgeting what is the budgeted amount for housing assistance for 2020 and 2021, matter of fact.
Mr. Chairman, I think the member has run ahead of the agenda again. The bit that we are dealing with now is about administrative guidance and support. I think the area that he wants to, which is on the administration of community assistance programs, I think where he is now is over on TP 87, which is still some ways away, and that may be part of the confusion. This vote doesn't deal with that.
Mr. Chair, I find it a little bit unfair because I see that we've answered some questions that didn't fall under this line item either. And if that's the case, then maybe I'm gonna have to start gauging which questions fall under which one too. But
Mr.
fine,
Chairman,
that's
Mr.
fine.
Chairman,
Just tell me where I can ask the question.
It's your call, but it's not unfair. We can't be skipping all over the agenda because people then don't know what it is they're voting on.
Well, Mr. Chair, why I decided to choose this line item, because in respect to the relevance is under the administration of community assistance program, we're talking about those who are being assisted.
Mr. Chairman, all I'm saying is the matters you're addressing are not dealt with in this vote. That's all I'm saying.
Ma'am, I think we had also covered it in the previous vote where questions were being asked. Let's just go ahead and take the votes as we go along, and we'll get down to TP 87 where you can ask the questions.
Sorry,
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I didn't hear you when you said we covered it in the previous vote.
We had similar situation where you had tried to ask questions on TP 87.
Yeah.
And we deferred it from the very first vote with regard to HCA 27. And then I think you're coming back here now with HCA 28. So just please hold the questions. Let's go down to get to TP 87, and let's just see what we can do to get through the rest of these.
Mr. Chair, the rental part, I don't see it on the under what heading would you be asking for that?
What sort of
TP
question do you
87
have?
isn't on here.
My FS is, and my chief officer's advised me the rentals would also come under TPA at 87.
Sorry?
My chief officer is also advising me that the rentals would come under TP 87 as well.
But Mr. Chair, I'm asking you under what line item that we intend to address today do we cover that? Because TP 87 is not on here. So where?
TP 87 is on there. Page
My
15.
apologies, Mr. Chair.
We clear now? All right, let's move forward then. Any other questions on HCA 28? All in favor of HCA 28, Administration of Community Assistance Programs,
Mr. Chair.
$2,940,000.
Mr. Chair, I do have one. I apologize. I know it may come off, starting to become a little bit annoying, but this under the housing repairs assistance. I see that we've in the budget statements under page 187, we've increased the potential chance of housing repairs or projections for housing repairs. Is there different kinds of housing repairs? Because I recall just last year, or was it earlier part of this year, where we came and got a substantial amount of money for persons who needed houses repairs. And then there seems to be a different type of housing repair program through the Needs Assessment Unit, and then a separate one that is more allocated to a separate committee, or can you explain?
No, Mr. Chairman, there's just one. What happened last year is we spent the budget, the entire year's budget in the first couple of months because there was just so many cases in backlog. So we came to the House, and the House voted in block for a substantial uplift so that we could address the backlog.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So why does it say then, and unless I'm getting this wrong, on MCA 9 on page 187 of the budget statement, that we're saying that we only dealt with 15 of those housing repairs in 2019? Would that be correct, or?
Chairman, I don't know where we are now. And this is why it's so important that we stick to this thing, because everybody gets confused. I have one of those minds that insists on order, and when it's not that way, I get a bit discombobulated.
Mr. Chair, I want to help the Premier. He is probably right. I can deal with it under HCA 37, which is the fifth one on the line item, so I can deal with it there, if he wants to go in that particular order.
Thank you.
I put this to the vote then. HCA, all those in favor of HCA 28, Administration of Community Assistance Programs, $2,945,884 in 2020 and $3,028,203 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. Ayes have it. HCA 29, Public Education on Social and Gender Issues, $420,658 in 2020, $422,927 in 2021. Are there any questions?
Mr.
Member for Newlands.
Just a quick question. It seems that we're forecasting to do less in the upcoming years in terms of community presentations, meetings conducted. I just looking at the figures given in the planning estimates and look like they're going down rather than up. I just wonder if we could get an explanation as to why.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have had the benefit of working very closely with the Department of Children and Family Services and restructuring their department, that they have specialized teams. Each of the teams, as a result, will have programs that are very focused on their specific areas. So although that particular line item, we might see a decrease in numbers overall, we will be seeing specific presentations and programs that are for those very focused areas in the community. In addition, of course, we have our usual month for children and month for older persons, which is covered for the entire month and is extremely extensive in terms of public education and community involvement.
Any other questions? Those in favor of HCA 29, Public Education on Social and Gender Issues, $420,658 in 2020 and $422,927 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. Ayes have it. HCA 31, Social Work Intervention Programs, $2,501,001 and $2 million in 2020 and $2,516,353 in 2021. Questions? Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just hope for some added information about this area. Is it fair to say to the chief, ask the chief officer, is this the area where you see much of the intervention for vulnerable young people and families?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it is, and as I indicated, we have had the benefit of establishing specialized teams. One of those teams are indeed for our children that we are concerned about that might be at risk, and so focus will be put on not only the rehabilitation but intervention and prevention.
Thank you. Through you, maybe there's a factor here why this has happened, but can you tell me, I see that it's hard to take a forecast of what 2020 and 2021 will be like because there's so much missing information from 2019 to compare it to see if there's a pattern. But one thing that was interesting to me is that there's almost $3 million that was used last year in preventative measures for young people and the like. But the next 2 years is a $500,000 difference less. So are we spending less money on preventative measures now for vulnerable people?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we are being wiser with our use of government funding, and again, with us now having the specialized areas, we have had to refocus funding so that it is spread throughout the various teams. So before, where it was all in literally one pot, we've now have it divided up within the specialized teams.
Okay, all right. I'll accept that. But can you, there's one area of information that is missing here that is really important, I think, in order for analysis that we're on the right track, which is the second item under quantity. Number of new vulnerable and at-risk families identified and receiving preventative services. Now, we predict that there's going to be 25 to 30 next year, 25 to 30 in 2021. But I can't compare it because there's no numbers from last year or this current year for 2019, the ending amount. I just try, we have the forecast, but in comparison to no, in 2019 it is nothing there. It says NA.
Mr. Chairman, the previous budget that was brought to the House would have had the forecast for 2018 and 2019 to be able to make the comparisons from. That's all I'm saying.
Fair enough, Mr. Chair, and I thank the Premier for his intervention. Unfortunately, we don't have the 2 years ago budget here with me for me to go examine. Normally that answer would be in this actual budget, but it just says NA here in this budget.
And through you, Mr. Chair, part of the reason for that is because this is considered one of the new services that we're offering, which is our diversion program. So again, with us making the restructuring and putting some of the specialized teams in place, we would not have had some of the statistics for the past 2 years to do the comparison. Some of these programs, such as the diversion program, is going to be new. So we will be tracking them as of this budget year.
Member for George, Town.
Just to put this in a much broader context, one of the things that we looked at on the budget statement, which is on page 200, which is a statement of financial performance, you would actually see that the total expenses for this ministry as a whole went from 14.3 million forecasted in 2019 to 15.3 million for 2020 and 15.5 million. So there is a 1.2 million increase within this ministry. I think the only questions or the line of questioning for us isn't whether the funding is available, because the funds are there to be moved around within the ministry, but rather in terms of what's the priority, what's the focus, and really what's the policy long term. And I think this is really where the question should be going. But in terms of funding, the funding has already increased, or the expenses has increased year on year within this particular ministry. So I think what we should just be more focused on is pretty much the areas of priorities. We accept that no government, barring you're sitting on millions of oil reserve, can really budget sufficient funds to take care of the needs of everyone within their community. So just a matter of the priorities and where the focus is and where it is that we're looking to put the attention on, and then how do we learn from it and grow from it. I think that's really where the conversation within this ministry needs to focus on. Thank you.
All in favor of HCA 31, Social Work Intervention Programs, $2,501,001 in 2020 and $2,516,353 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. HCA 37, Administration of Temporary Housing Services, $518,455 in 2020, $524,310 in 2021. Any questions? Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is the appropriate time for me to ask the question about the housing repairs assistance under MCA 9 in the budget statement on page 187 about the number of housing repairs conducted. I see that we did 15.
And remember, this is temporary housing, not repairs. I think we're giving you the vote that we need you to ask that question on the TP 87.
No, Mr. Chair, this is why I'm trying to say, is there two different programs, because this is under this line item.
And this, okay, it comes under this line item?
Yes.
I don't have that information, but so
Well,
I
Mr.
will
Chair,
allow
you're
it
the
to go ahead.
finance
Just one moment, let's get on the same page. So
Please proceed, sir.
let me see.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, just for clarity, if I am misunderstanding something, please clarify, because I understand the housing assistance for rental. I'm talking about housing repairs, which falls under MCA 9. Now, is this the area we allocated all that money to in the last supplementary?
And I now see that it is included in here, so please proceed.
Thank you. So, either
No,
the
Mr.
Premier...
Mr. Chairman, I am confused myself here. Let me see if I can, because this is not where the money came from for all of those housing repairs that we did. This one says Administration of Temporary Housing Services, HCA 37. That is something different.
Premier, if you look down the bottom where it says group comprises budget statement outputs, CF 33 and MCA 9, then if you go to the budget statements and you look at MCA 9 on page 187, then you actually would see that description there.
Administrative costs and where the money actually came from is TP 60.
So the money in this vote, MCA 9, is the administrative costs of the program, not the money used to actually do the work, which is millions, not a few $100,000. That's why I knew it couldn't be right. But Mr. Chairman, the member is so anxious to ask these questions.
No, Mr. Chair, don't
Let's-
assume what I'm about to ask, because I'm not talking about the money right now. I'm talking about the outputs, which is in the administrative element. So I would appreciate the Premier not assume what I'm about to get to. Yes. In respect to the same administrative elements you're talking about. So we're talking about the persons who go and conduct the investigations as to how many housing repairs should be done. Would that be correct, Chief Officer?
Under HC 37, that is indeed a component, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, through you, what I'm trying to get at is whether the amounts of investigations were 15 from an administrative perspective in 2019, which is in the budget statement on page 187.
As a forecast, not as actuals.
Well, but
It says forecast.
so can we get the final number of how many was done in 2000?
Yes, you can.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, in 2019, 34 projects were addressed and completed.
Thank you. Now we're getting somewhere. Mr. Chair,
That's up to now. The year is not through yet.
fair enough. So we may have some more in short order. Mr. Chair, the Premier was ever so gracious to agree to provide me in this honorable House with a list with a breakdown by constituency when we appropriated those monies of who have been helped up to when we appropriated those monies. Up to this day, we have not been provided with that. Is there any particular reason, or can he provide now? Because I know we've added more persons, but at that stage, Mr. Chair, at that stage, my concern was that there was a lot of constituencies of members of the opposition whose constituents who have applied weren't getting assistance. So ideally, I would like to know, based on a breakdown of constituency level, how many people in constituencies, in each constituency, are getting assistance based on applications.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure we have the information by constituency, but we certainly have it by district, because the whole committee is made up of district people from each district. So there's people from Georgetown, from West Bay, from Northside, not from Prospect, not from Red Bay, not from Georgetown Central. It's not structured that way. But we have those details, and I think we can give you those.
Through you, Mr. Chair, for the budget cycle 2018-19, 13 projects were completed in the district of Georgetown, 7 in the district of West Bay, 8 in Northside, 5 Bordentown, 8 Easton, giving a total of 41. Northside 8.
Yeah, she said 18, 19. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to be ever so sensitive with what I'm about to say, and I hope the Premier can understand where I'm coming from. What my concern is in respect to this is that this is a big assistance for Caymanians who genuinely need it. It can be used as a political football in the assistance for certain constituencies. We are now on a constituency electoral district basis, no longer on a larger district basis. I think it's important to have that breakdown. And Premier, you did give the commitment to have it broken down by constituency. I know it's not collected that way now, but I think it needs to be collected that way moving forward. For the interest that members of the opposition can say, are my constituents that are in need in my areas also getting a genuine benefit? Because, and I'm not saying that this is what is happening, but if I don't have the details and the data to examine it, I can't say it is not happening either, which is, are only persons in Prospect or Red Bay or Georgetown North or West Bay South or what have you are getting the assistance, but the people of Georgetown Central or people of Newlands or Bordentown West are not getting their assistance. that data has to be collected in a way for us to do our job to analyze that it's not being used as a political football, because it can. So understand where I'm coming from. I'm not suggesting anything, but the data collection is important for the proper analysis.
Mr. Chairman, shame on the member for taking this very important program down that terrible road. I am disappointed. Mr. Chairman, this committee is made up of people from each district. It is not made up of politicians. The politicians, even the minister myself, does not choose who gets to do it or not. The only influence I have is when, because the committee operates, and I'll have the chief officer explain it, within financial parameters. It is only when a project is over the amount that they're authorized to that a case has to be made by the committee through the chief officer to the minister to say, this is over, what's the requirement? This is over 25,000, but this is a truly needy case for the following reasons that I even become involved in the process. We've tried as far as it is possible in this terrible game called politics to minimize those sorts of issues, because it will erode the credibility and the fairness of the program if we take it down that road. The committee is charged with responsibility to look and see what are the most needy cases, because there's never be enough money. Does this meet the criteria? Should this be acted upon? And that recommendation comes up through the ministry to myself if the amount is over 25. If it is not over 25, I don't even know what happens most of the time. When there are complaints about it, as there has been recently, it is because the member from Northside said to me, there's this thing, I didn't even know the situation existed prior to that. So I do not want us to go down the road of infusing this with political considerations about whether it should be Georgetown Central or Georgetown North. If there are needy cases in those constituencies, they need to be referred and they'll get dealt with the way that all of the others get dealt with.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Premier, you can feel bad all you like. I say it for a reason, because many constituents have come to me who've asked for assistance. It's not until I made a lot of noise in the last supplementary budget before many of them were approved. And it's not until after I say stuff like this that...
So also you had some of your constituents approved?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's after I had to ask you for the breakdown by constituency.
Thanks for that
and
confession.
hence the reason I have to do it again. But Mr. Chair, in all due respect, these things do happen. And without data analysis, one cannot examine. I'm not suggesting that this administration is doing it, but I want to be able to examine it to protect my Georgetown Central persons, because that's my job. So you can feel bad all you like, but without data, I can't examine that to make sure it's not happening, and that's my job.
Mr. Chairman.
All those in favor of HCA 1737, Administration of Temporary Housing Services, $518,455 in 2020 and $524,310 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. Ayes have it. HCA 38, Supervision and Support of Vulnerable Persons, $5,877,687 in 2020 and $5,970,166 in 2021. Questions? There are no questions. All in favor of HCA 38, Supervision and Support of Vulnerable Persons, for $5,877,687 in 2020 and $5,970,166 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. Ayes have it. HCA 39, Governance and Stakeholder Collaboration, $318,244 in 2020 and $320,860 in 2021, standing part of the part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. HCA 40, Supervision, Care and Protection of Children, $1,586,397 in 2020 and $1,597,231 in 2021. Questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Member for West Bay West.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this particular vote, is this in the various homes or for the various homes that government supervises?
Mr. Chairman, which one are we on now, sir?
HCA 40. Supervision, Care, and Protection of Children on page 79 in the plan and estimates page.
Mr. Chairman, the chief officer who's sitting next to me has explained to me what it is, and I'm satisfied. You want it on record?
I think for the records and for everyone's knowledge, she should go ahead and share it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this particular item covers the MASH Special Unit, which is a multi-agency team, as well as foster care and adoption services.
Member for Bordentown West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, sir. How many children do we presently have within the foster care program? We're on
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have 29 children in foster care services and 27 in voluntary placements.
Thank you very much. And all these children that we have, are they all placed with Caymanian families?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it is a mixture of nationalities. All of the families that are considered foster parents are vetted through the Department of Children and Family Services, offered training, and provided with guidance through that entity.
Thank you very much. Just one last question, and this is just more for my knowledge, Mr. Chairman. If we have non-Caymanians in the foster care program, and first of all, I want to thank them for genuinely stepping up and offering this program with some of our children. I just want to find out from the ministry, through you, Mr. Chairman, if any of the parents are applying for permanent residence or status or anything, are they reaching out to the department to get any letters or anything to aid in their application process? And if so, or if there are even a policy in place where the department would be involved with something like that. Because I do believe that one of the metrics is basically having some kind of ties to the country and community service and all of that. I need to understand if this goes towards, anything that they're doing goes towards their immigration application. Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have never had any of our parents request such letters or support from the organization. They have been involved through the goodness of their hearts.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm very happy to hear that.
All in favor of HCA 40, supervised care and protection of children, for $1,586,397 in 2020 and $1,597,231 in 2021. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. Ayes have it. CAY 2, Children and Youth Services Foundation, $3,100,000 in 2020 and 2021. Are there any questions? Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the Minister or the Chief Officer, I'm sure that we're all aware by now there is a pretty strong scandal, so to speak, around the island about what's happening down there. Can you give an update as to whether there's any truth to it? I wouldn't want to repeat it if there's not, but if you are aware, can you tell us what's happening, because it's a bit concerning. And I think some of what I'm understanding to have happened is based on the person in charge. And I remember bringing up concerns about that individual in the last budget. So I don't know if the Chief Officer can give us some updates.
Through you, Mr. Chair, any reports of this nature is significantly concerning across the board. This is a matter that we are looking into. We have a meeting scheduled with the chair of the board to further discuss this. At this point, we are considering them allegations, and we cannot confirm or deny at this point.
Fair enough. Thank you. The Cades Foundation, would they have to follow the same policies and procedures as a civil servant, the persons who work there, by way of pension, health insurance, and those kinds of things?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we will have to obtain that information just for clarity and confirmation, and happy to report that back.
All in favor then of CAY2, Children and Youth Services Foundation, for $3,100,000 in 2020?
Mr. Chair, sorry.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I just want one last question. I unfortunately remember that there was an incident with a child passing as a result of drowning, and there was investigations to some of the staff members being potentially held accountable. I know it's a matter.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
that matter is sub judice. So
That's what I was just trying to find out, whether it was still before the court or
yeah,
resolved
that's
or
still
not.
before the court. Still
Okay.
before the court.
Thank you.
Fair enough. All in favor of CAY2, Children and Youth Services Foundation, $3,100,000 in 2020 and $3,100,000 in 2021. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. Ayes have it. NGS 64, Care of the Indigent and Disabled Elderly Persons, $2,040,000 in 2020 and 2021. Questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I know that we give various kinds of assistance to the indigent and disabled and elderly persons. What aspect of care does this particular vote carry? This is,
Times.
see, I just want to make sure. This is the contribution to Pine,
$2 million, that's about right, yeah.
the people that we have there.
Yes, sir.
Six four. It's this. Can you see that now?
Mr. Chairman, that's the Pines Retirement Home.
Mr. Chairman, just so this is it to the Pines or is it to the government aspect? Because I know we do both. We give Pines a grant, as I thought we did, or maybe still do, but then we take care of the geriatric home or geriatric part of the portion program there. So the grant, yeah. This is not the grant then. I just want to make sure.
This particular item is for persons that are resident in the Pines, and they're the light care and heavy care residents that are residents in the
portion.
Pine.
So it's a geriatric portion that the government deals with. Thank you very much.
That is correct.
Mr. Chair, can the minister say if the Pines has had a recent audit? Financial audit?
Mr. Chair, the answer is no, they haven't had a recent one. I'm trying to determine what recent means. I mean, so
But Mr. Chair, maybe I should rephrase the question. When was the last audit done?
I don't know.
But Mr. Chair, what I'm concerned about is I asked this question, I think, in the last budget, and there wasn't a financial audit done then either. And before that, which would have pushed us back now almost 5 to 6 years, that's when we had the whole debacle with the monies being missing. So I'm concerned that we want to make sure that we're having audits of that location, not only for safety purposes of the elderly there, but also for the monies that the government is allocating for it, that it's properly being managed. So an audit is necessary. Or at least we should be concerned about that fact that the audit hasn't been done.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with the member, but it's an NGO. It's not a government. But the fact is, the member's right. Government is allocating money to it. So we should insist that there is an audit, even though we don't have the power to carry it out ourselves.
Member for Bodden Town West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the Honorable Premier. In this case, when we consider the amount of money being spent and everything else, is the Pines Retirement Home registered as a non-profit, or is it a Section 80 company, or is it just a regular company that's set up for profit? Would the Premier be aware of that?
I don't know, and neither does my team. But I would expect now it would have to be registered as an NPO.
Yeah.
But whether it has, I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's really what I'm getting at, because if it is, because I know we had companies, I think that was previously set up before as Section 80 companies, and I don't think the requirements are stringent, but if they are set up as a registered non-profit, then at a minimum, then we would expect at some point audited financial statements to be carried out, or for audit to be carried out. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just want to confirm, were we getting a commitment from the chief officer to request an audit of the Pines? Suggest an audit, because by all means, I'm not saying that we should not allocate the funds to them, but we have an obligation to make sure that we have audits for monies being spent by the government.
the thing is, we're paying for these services. These are patients who government has assumed responsibility for. So we're paying them. They're providing a service. So that's one thing. But the other bit, which I'm not certain about, is I know for years government actually gave a grant. So it would be in that context that I would be concerned about it.
And my recollection of the NPO law is that there are certain thresholds in terms of donations solicited and received from the public over which before an audit is triggered. So I'm not sure that it's at that threshold or level. I just don't know. But I mean, what we have here are commercial terms and a commercial agreement between
Fair
government
enough,
and the entity.
and maybe they're not obligated to do so, but outside of the financial audit, I was also indicating about the potentially a safety audit too, because we're spending a tremendous amount of money using their services, and we want to make sure that they're up to par with all the other safety elements for our Cayman elderly that go there. I mean, I don't want to say why I'm asking that, because I don't want to undermine the location, but there have been concerns about the handling of people, and I want to know that there's an audit, not only financially, but from a safety perspective of the handling of the what you call, not customers, but the residents there.
Mr. Chairman, the government sends in a social worker on a regular basis to assess the level of care of patients, if I call them, I'm not sure I should call them patients, but of the elderly persons who are there under care. So we have a certain level of comfort about what's happening there in terms of the care of the elderly. And we've confirmed it is a registered NPO.
All in favor then of NGS 64, care of the indigent and disabled elderly persons, $2,040,000 in 2020, $2,040,000 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. NGS 66, foster care for children, $343,000 in 2020 and 2021. Are there any questions? All those in favor of NGS 66, foster care for children, $343,000 in 2020 and $343,000 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. NGS 67, community program after school, $71,982 in 2020 and 2021. Any questions? All those in favor of NGS 67, community programs after school, $771,982 in 2020 and $71,982 in 2022, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. NGS 71, support for battered women and children, $325,000 in 2020 and 2021. Questions? All in favor of NG?
Mr. Chair, can the chief officer just give us a overview of this allocation and how the program is going?
Through you, Mr. Chair, these funds are provided to the Crisis Center for, as indicated, for support towards battered women and children. We have worked very closely with the Crisis Center. They have provided very well-needed services in the community, and we continue to support them as they support us whenever the need arises.
Thank you.
All those in favor of NGS 71, support for battered women and children, $325,000 in 2020 and $325,000 in 2021. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. NGS 72, Therapeutic Services for Young Persons. All those in $25,000 in 2020 and 2021. Questions? All those in favor of NGS 72, Therapeutic Services for Young Persons, $25,000 in 2020 and $25,000 in 2021. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. NGS 86. Can I put these two to the vote? All those in favor of NG... Okay. NGS 86, Community Programs, Meals on Wheels, $79,018 in 2020 and 2021. Questions?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Through you, can you tell me exactly, is this just the one general area for the Meals on Wheels program? I know the overarching group manages in different districts. So is this just the one payment that we make to that one main group? I'm just trying to understand how this payment is made for this one.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, this is government's contribution to a very well-established program in the community, and we provide this as a form of partial assistance. Obviously, their fundraising and private sector involvement covers other aspects.
I must say, Mr. Chairman, this is one program I fully support. I used to volunteer and do this, and if there's anything I could probably say, it's worthwhile, and I would like to really see it expand across different areas. And one thing I would encourage members to do, if they do get a chance, some days if you have a free time, go and help with deliveries. Miss Hope Foster in Buddentown does an excellent job. And sometimes just visiting our elderly people and the look on their faces, I can tell you it's a wonderful program.
Member for...
Mr. Chairman, through you, about a month and a half back, the lady was on the radio at the same time from the member from West Bay North, and she said that there were 80 people waiting in West Bay, pending monies hopefully to get from the government. Have you all upped the ante a little bit in this?
No, we haven't. In this, as I said, Mr. Chairman, this is not a government program. One of the dangers that I've seen, and I've commented on many times, is that many programs get started, private sector programs, and in short order, they become reliant on government funding. It is important that I believe for the benefit of this country is that the private sector continue to support in part. Government will do its bit. Many of these social programs, not just for the money's sake, but because it gives private sector people better insight into what the true social conditions in this country are. If government just takes over every program and fund it, there is no need for any effort or initiative on behalf of the private sector to be truly involved in these programs. If there is a true shortage and things can't happen, then of course we will deal with it. But there hasn't been a specific request this time. So
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I must say that's probably the first time I've agreed with every single word of that sentences that the Premier just said. Usually there's at least one word I don't agree with, but I agree with him wholeheartedly in that respect. I'll figure it out. You see, you made me forget where I was now. Oh, here it is. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your patience. I maybe this is wrong information, but am I of the understanding that through some other arrangements of the ministries that the Meals on Wheels property there in Georgetown have now been given permission to be in charge, not control, but be in charge of the adjacent property where they where I guess you would call the cabooses and what we know as Jati used to be there as the vendors. Thank you, Mr. Leader. Are you aware of that or no? I think Minister indicated where I can get the answer. I'll wait till another time.
All in favor of NGS 86 community programs, Meals on Wheels, $79,018 in 2020 and $79,018 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill. NGS 87, Gender Equality Command, $6,000 in 2020 and $14,000 in 2021, all standing part of the schedule to the bill. Please say aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. TP 41, Permanent Financial Assistance, $11,016,000 in 2020 and $12,882,000 in 2021. Questions? Member for East End.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I know there was a time when we said that there were so many on the waiting list, and maybe they can do 4 to 7 at the same time. I think in both those instances we had people on the waiting list, and I noticed that they're increasing. Is that because of the increase that the government is proposing for next year?
Mr. Chairman, I am happy to tell the committee that there is no longer any waiting list for seamen and veterans. If somebody's application hasn't been granted, it is because there is some issue with it which might need to be worked through. But there's no waiting list. There is no financial shortfall preventing it from being dealt with. The permanent financial assistance, there are some people who are categorized as temporary financial assistance, but what they receive is the same, who will now get transferred to this, because not only have we increased the stipend, but we've raised the cap to allow in more. So since we took office, we've gone from $550 a month to $650 a month to $750 a month to $850 a month. So in 2021, it'll be at $950 per month. So I could just say for the benefit of the committee that overall the social services budget has gone from $39.3 million in 2018 to $41.7 million in 2019 to a projected $47.3 million in 2020 and a projected $50.6 million in 2021.
Sir.
Mr. Chair.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
for this vote, permanent financial assistance, how many people are we projecting to receive this monthly payment? Or how many average per month?
the second one again? To 11:30. So, Mr. Chairman, the financial assistance payments to the elderly and disabled, the number of persons projected to assist in the 2021 year between 1,080 and 1,130. And I believe the number is a similar one with respect to the following year.
Sir, just confirm, thanks very much, Premier. Can you just confirm again for 2020 what's the monthly payment they'll be receiving?
$850
Okay.
for 2020. And then the 1st of January 2021, $950.
Mr. Chair.
Remember, it's Georgetown
Thank
Central.
you, Mr. Chair. Can the minister or the chief officer explain the whole cap increase element and why that factors in here? And I don't quite understand it because there's a question I have, but maybe it'll be an answer.
So, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, so the question from the leader of the opposition was whether there was a queue. In other words, there are people who were qualified for permanent financial assistance, but we didn't have the budget to do so. So what I've explained is those people who we couldn't accommodate on permanent financial assistance are on temporary financial assistance. We raised the cap so that there is more in the budget, so those who qualify for permanent financial assistance will now be moved across into that category.
Okay, thank you. Because I'm probably going to say something that's going to end up getting you out of trouble, but whatever is in the best interest of the country. Getting you out of trouble meaning I can't pick on you. Would it make sense then, would that resolve the whole problem of, or the issue that what is perceived here by the transfer payments, TP41, that shows in 2019 we dealt with 1,000 to 1,025, to now the increase from 1,080 to 1,130 persons. That's where the increase jumped up? Because if I look at that without thinking about the cap factor, it sounds like there's more people who need permanent services continuing to grow in numbers when the economy is supposed to be booming. So I'm just saying, is it the cap increase that's caused that?
So, Mr. Chairman, through you to the member, there are a number of factors here. One is these are projections, so they're not hard. We don't know exactly how many people they're going to be, so these are projections. That's why there is this range. The second is, in each year since we took office, we've increased the number, the amount of the stipend you get by $100 a month. So therefore, the cost will increase as well.
Thank you, Premier. Through you, Mr. Chair, we have established the cost of the money is necessary, but the numbers of persons projected to be assisted is where my concern is, because if I look at that number, it's telling me that there's more people who won't be needing permanent financial assistance. So I'm asking, is it because you've opened up the cap to get those people who are waiting in line that's caused the number to jump up, or is it realistically that I can interpret that there's actually more people who are in need, or who actually need financial assistance?
So we're moving people that we placed on temporary to the financial. They qualify, but we didn't want to disadvantage them, so we gave them temporary.
So, Mr. Chairman, to repeat what I said a little earlier, there are people who were in the queue for permanent financial assistance who met the qualifications. There were people who were in the queue. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, to the honorable leader, and everybody knows how much I love him. He asked the original question, so instinctively I looked at him to answer it. So we moved we are now able, or we will now be able to move those persons who were in the queue for which there was no budget in permanent financial assistance, across from temporary financial assistance, which they've been on, so that they form part of that category.
Thank you. Which leads me to my last question about this area. Would it then be fair to assume that if the numbers are not increasing, that the temporary assistance numbers of projections should decrease?
Well, one would hope so, Mr. Chairman. As the member has acknowledged, the economy is booming, unemployment is down, but we all know, which is why we have agreed to give the civil service a 5% increase, cost of living increase this year, which is why we've agreed to give these categories of persons who are in temporary financial assistance, permanent financial assistance, seamen, and veterans a $400 increase per month over the course of one term, rising from $550 when we took office to $950 by the time we demit office.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad that the Premier has recognized that even though the economy is booming, Caymanians are still finding it hard to survive, and the government has to subsidize for it. And I'll leave it there, Mr. Chair. I'll move on to the next line item.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
For East End.
Yeah, this is a personal interest of mine. Can they say if the seamen or their applications are reducing? Well, it's a dying breed, isn't it?
Finally, Mr. Chairman, finally.
Yeah, because I suspected that. My generation was the last, and there weren't too many of us.
But, Mr. Chairman, a number of their widows are coming on.
Well, don't expect that from me anytime soon. I'm going to be around here to give you a lot of trouble for a long time.
Member for Town West, and then member for Northside.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Through you, just out of curiosity, and this is just a matter of completeness, in terms of those that receive the going back to, I guess, permanent financial assistance, do most of those people, do they also get Cineco coverage as a kind of to go along, as opposed to having, I guess, health insurance or something deducted, or what is the process in that regard?
Mr. Chairman, I suppose in general the answer is yes, but it's not automatic. They have to be assessed for indigent medical coverage. But
sorry, I take it we're just doing the TP47 because the questions I realize is between the two, and the same answer would apply to the Siemens because I think they have their own insurance thing going, so they should be covered. I think they're
no, they don't. They get coverage on the Cineco.
Yep.
They make a small contribution. Is I think the distinction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Member for Northside.
To you, Mr. Chairman, is the ministry given any consideration to calculating what is a living wage so that the amount of money that we give in to these people will cover electricity, food, and I think insurance is probably way beyond. But we often find that people who are getting this permanent financial assistance are also, in addition, having to apply for vouchers occasionally for food and electricity. And I think what we need to do so as to show greater respect for our senior citizens, who most of the people that qualify for this, is if we gave them a figure that we calculated which would allow them to buy all the food that they need and pay their electricity and water bill, as opposed to having to go back and re-qualify. And they may get vouchers for 3 months and then they have to go back again. So I'm just wondering if there's any consideration being given to try and come up with a figure which would allow that to happen so that they don't have to consistently come back and beg for assistance.
Mr. Chairman, This is, as it is correctly described, permanent financial assistance. This is not a pension. This is not a salary. The government cannot be expected to pay what is a living wage to every person in the country who needs financial assistance. I don't know what that number would ever come to. This is an ex gratia payment by the government to assist people who need financial assistance. It is not intended to have their family abrogate responsibility for them, or indeed for those of them who are still able to work, as some of them are, to make an effort themselves. So it is assistance. It's not intended to be a living wage.
But Mr. Chairman, I agree with what the Premier said. But these are people who qualify through a means test for that assistance. Yeah. But what I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, is then oftentimes they have to go back and re-qualify to get utilities paid because what they're getting is not sufficient to pay the utilities, and they often get, in addition to this, vouchers for the supermarket. So what I'm looking for is whether the ministry is considering for those people who qualify, not for people who don't need assistance, but for people who need assistance, just to prevent the people from my constituency having to come Georgetown on a number of occasions to get in line, to get this assistance and re-qualify each time because their paperwork is not inconsiderate or insignificant to get one of those qualifications. So I'm just talking about the people who qualify for the need only.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is, as a part of the review of the poor relief law, or what we're now referring to as the financial assistance law, one of the components that the working group has taken into consideration is cost of living and specific costing for rent, food, and basic living expenses. So that is an aspect that we are looking at and taking into consideration. In addition to that, however, we appreciate that there are times when it might be a month that an individual circumstances might change, and in addition to the PFA, they might require an additional support. At that point, the needs assessment will have to be redone and they will have to be taken into consideration. But oftentimes, those are rare and few and far apart.
To you, Mr. Chairman, and I've raised this issue in several budgets, is the department, does the department now have in place a system of checks to make sure that the people who are getting this financial assistance is in fact getting the benefit of the financial assistance? Because I have seen cases in the past where the check is going to a child and you go and open the cupboards and it look like Bangladesh. There's nothing in it but cockroaches and spiders. And I've asked as far back as maybe 6 or 8 years ago that the department put in place some kind of inspection to ensure that when the government provides financial assistance for an individual, because often people who qualify for this financial assistance may be bedridden, and therefore, obviously for banking purposes and everything else, it goes to a child or a sibling or some other family member. And we need to know that the person who's entitled to it is in fact getting the value of the money.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the NAU has staff members that are doing these checks. However, what we would ask any member of the public, if they are concerned or if they feel that the individual is not benefiting from the funds, please bring it to our attention.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to ask, how many people are on the temporary assistance? Understood, but where I'm going is that there are a number of those, if I'm correct, that are really temporary. They're in transition or so. But will they be transferred into permanent?
Mr. Chairman, to answer the last part of the question first, it depends whether they qualify. Sometimes people are having a difficult time because there's a loss of a job, there's something, but then they get back on their feet. That's why it's temporary. But at any given time, there are between 800 and 1,000 families
On temporary?
on temporary financial assistance. So, as I say, you know, the mother loses a job or gets sick or something, and then her salary falls, and they need assistance for a while until she gets back on her feet, and those sorts of things.
Well, that's
If it is a permanent, if it's a truly permanent condition, then they need to get transferred across.
okay. That's what I was looking for.
Particularly older people who are not going to be able to go back in employment, or their fortunes are not likely to improve, right? So,
Right, and I was of the understanding that temporary assistance was also used for people in transition between jobs, and those are not the ones that is properly monitored, and when they get back on their feet, that's why as I understand it, that's why it's issued for 3 months at a time. Yeah.
right, so it'll expire, they have to apply to renew it.
All in favor of TP 41 permanent financial assistance, $11,016,000 in 2020 and $12,882,000 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. TP 47, ex gratia benefit payments to seamen and ex-servicemen, $9,843,000 in 2020, $11,115,000 in 2021. Are there any questions? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, is there anybody on the waiting list now that has qualified as a seaman?
No, Mr. Chairman. We have cleared the backlog, and we have raised the cap, and we have raised what seamen get from 550 to 650 to 750 to 850 in 2020 and 950 in 2021.
And I'm leaning on you, sir, to just make it $1,000 starting this January, so that we really look after them, because the extra little $100 in January can only buy 10 pounds of fish, 2 cans of corned beef, and 1 bag of rice.
Mr. Chair,
But I'm not. But the question,
Mr. Chairman, if I could just answer that, the government will monitor how well the budget is going, and before the elections, we may come back and raise it.
and I'll support it, as long as you give me credit. Support it, sir. But more importantly, Mr. Chairman, getting back to the seaman, the backlog that was cleared up, did that include people who may have applied 2 years ago and were refused because there was no space on it, or do those people need to reapply? And Mr. Premier, I'll talk to you about one specific case I have that I believe falls in that category.
Mr. Chairman, if you qualify, you were never refused. It just, the budget wouldn't accommodate it. But some people are refused because they haven't been able to meet the criteria. So,
And some people and some people who don't qualify get through, depending on who signed their, or it was that way before, depending on who signed their application. Because I refused to sign application because I know the man worked for Public Works all his life, but he went to another district and got another JP to sign it, and he's getting it now, and I've been trying to stop it for 4 years.
yeah, yes, Mr. Chairman, that may be the case. I don't know. When I finished, or when I graduated from high school in 1978, that wouldn't make me go. So,
Chairman, my father took me for 2 summer vacations to make sure I wouldn't want it as a career, the way they treated me on the ship. And I get seasick, sir.
And are there any other questions, please? We have member for Georgetown Central, please.
Well, Mr. Chair, I just want to say I am happy that this administration had taken on board my first initial motion that I brought to this House, which was to increase the seaman benefits to 1,000. We're almost there, but I'm glad that they're following through with my motion I brought to the House, even though they didn't want to actually vote on it themselves. But I'm glad to see that they're moving forward.
Didn't want to go ahead. Right. All those in favor then of TP 47, ex gratia benefit payments to seamen and ex-servicemen, $9,843,000 in 2020, $11,115,000 in 2021, starting part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. TP 57, Children and Family Services for Support, $350,000 in 2020 and 2021. All in favor of TP 57, Children and Family Services Support, $350,000 in 2020 and $350,000 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. TP 60, Housing Assistance, $375,000 in 2020 and 2021. Questions? All in favor of TP?
Right here.
I'm not doing you bad. I'm just trying to get through the appropriations. I thought we were going to vote them in block. You go ahead, ask your question, sir. I acknowledge you.
All right. No, I'm just wondering if this completes the amount of housing assistance that was needed for the repairs.
Mr. Chairman, this amount in this TP is only for the administrative costs. The actual amount for the housing repairs is in another vote, and if the FS can help me with the number, but it's substantially more than that.
Mr. Chairman, I respectfully withdraw that question. The Premier need not answer anymore. He has had enough room to say what he needed to say today.
All in favor of TP 60, Housing Assistance, $375,000 in 2020 and $375,000 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. TP 87, Temporary Financial Assistance, $4,220,000 in 2020, $4,230,000 in 2021. Are there any questions? Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Finally get to that location that I had the concerns about, and I'm going to try my best not political, but I'm really concerned about this area, Premier. As I was saying previously, in the last two budgets, 19 and 18, we had projected a budget of $1.9 million for 2019 and $1.9 million for 2018. I requested a breakdown of the transfer payments 87 to see how much was going towards the rental accommodations section. I got that from the finance ministry. And in it, when I got it 3 days last week, the budget for financial assistance for temporary housing assistance was only 1.8 for 2020 and 2021. Funnily enough, when I mentioned the fact that they were actually under budgeting less than the previous 2 years, I got a new updated one this morning. Just because of that one comment, it is now saying 2 million, just so I can say it's actually less than what it was before. But that's not the issue. The issue is, in the last 2 years, we had to come back to this honorable house to get supplementaries and the overall amount per year ended up being $3 million for housing, 18 and 19. Now we're only budgeting $2 million for 2020 and 2021. Considering the fact that we all recognize in this Honorable House that housing is a serious problem, particularly because the rental market prices have gone up and the availability has gone down, is this a realistic figure in order to address this problem, unless the department is saying they have a serious prediction that a number of people are going to decrease in the need for these houses, for the assistance?
Mr. Chairman, all of these things are interrelated. So we are moving a significant number of people who are in the queue for temporary financial assistance onto permanent financial assistance. So the amount of the budget necessary, the amount of money necessary for that aspect of this vote is thereby decreased by whatever that number is. Mr. Chairman, this is not an attempt by us on the budgeting. We've had the fiscal space to be able to budget fairly and accurately, as accurate as any budget can be. But the reality is, as we have demonstrated over the course of the last 5+ years, if we identify that there is a need, we will seek to increase the budget by supplementary appropriation. But these are the predicted or projected numbers.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to be notified in my humble opinion that I think this House is under budgeting for this particular area. We can't say that we came to this Honorable House just this year alone and spent $3 million assisting Caymanians who need temporary assistance, and then budget for next year for 33% less. And the market hasn't changed. The market has only increased in cost. And I'm worried that yet again, the administration is not listening to my advice, which reminds me of what he said the last time when I told him, the Premier, about this matter. You said it was impractical and unaffordable to build apartments. Now we have a problem with apartments for people with temporary housing.
Mr. Chairman, I'm still of that view. That's not how the government is proposing to deal with the issue. I welcome and accept advice given by any member of this House, but the member is supremely unqualified to give advice on these matters. We have a team of people in the ministry who have gone to school, who have practical experience in doing these things. I have to accept that advice together with my political judgment and that of my caucus and cabinet. It's not I discount what he says, but he can't sit here and challenge these figures on the basis of how he feels.
Mr. Chair, please allow me to read what the Premier said himself in his budget statement. Housing Development Trust is about, we're in discussions with the Housing Development Trust about the possibilities of renovating or redeveloping some existing government-owned homes and properties and bringing them back into the rental market. How are you going to say that your position is still the same when you yourself had accepted that the rental market is inefficient and it doesn't have enough? But you're saying that you still feel the same way. Which one is it? You increasing it, or you still feel that there's enough in
Mr.
the
Chairman,
market?
if you're going to allow this to get into a debate
Well, you
about
were
what I
I
said
don't
in
want
my
this to
budget,
get into a
I
political
will
gunfight, Premier.
take my budget back out here and we can read it over again.
Come on, we need to move on.
Mr. Chair, just a simple last question. In
Mr.
respect to
Chairman,
this housing.
I know why the member is so frustrated. Is because he played games in this House, was outside trying to make sure everybody on the side had spoken, and he got shut out of the debate. So now he wants to debate the budget address and throne speech in here. But it's not permissible and it's not right.
And I'm going to put a stop to this now because we need to take the vote on it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Although-
Mr. Chair, I have the last question.
Last question, and that's
Thank you.
it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can the Minister or the Chief Officer say that they believe that the $2 million is adequate enough to deal with the matter of temporary housing assistance for next year and $2 million for temporary housing assistance for the following year?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if we didn't, we wouldn't put it in the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All in favor of TP 87, temporary financial assistance, $4,220,000 in 2020 and $4,230,000 in 21. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. TP 88, aftercare support, $123,690 in 2020 and $124,650 in 2021. Questions? Member for Northside.
Mr. Chairman, just for my edification, this aftercare support is for children or after school, or what is it about?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this particular item are funds for children that are in our voluntary placement that might need some additional support in the community.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reason I ask is that the Chief Officer is aware that I am working with our senior citizens in Northside trying to develop we have it once a week now and we'd like to expand it. So we'll have a discussion after the budget is approved to see if we can find some assistance to give us to make it daily instead of once a week.
And through you, Mr. Chair, I am again very, very pleased to see that one of the specialized teams that has been established by the director of DCFS focuses on our aging population and expand services within the community.
All in favor of TP 88, aftercare support, $123,690 in 2020 and $124,650 in 2021. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. All against, no. The ayes have it. TP 89, youth aftercare payments, $80,000 in 2020 and 2021. Questions? Member for Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What age group is this targeted at?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this would be a person 17 and older that's coming out of our foster care program.
Oh, so coming out of foster care. Oh, okay. How is it applied throughout the districts? Is it done from a centralized location or is it spread out throughout the districts?
This is based on the need of the child. So at this point, we do not make our decision by the district, but by the child that's been identified and their needs.
Thank you. One last question. Are you satisfied that this vote is enough to meet the needs, the demand for this type of care?
Based on the number of children that is in our care at this point, yes, because oftentimes we continue to get some support from persons in the community to assist them with their transition into independent living. So we're not always responsible to fund it 100%.
Member Freestad.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I don't even know if I'm at the right spot, and I'll be guided by the chief officer, not the premier. I want to talk about, and if we have passed it, that's fine. because the deputy premier had me out of here for a long period of time. Deliberately so, I believe. Adoptions. We passed it? Okay. All right, that's fine. I came on Braco, boy.
All in favor of TP 89, youth aftercare payments for $80,000 in 2020 and $80,000 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. All those in favor of OE 78, depreciation of Ministry of Community Affairs executive assets, $68,024 in 2020, $69,314 in 2021, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. Ayes have it. EI 54, Ministry of Community Affairs, $150,000 in 2020 and 2021. Questions? All in favor of
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I just want to say before we finish up this last vote in this area, I want to thank the staff of the Ministry of Community Affairs. I know sometimes we get hard inside here, but you're doing an amazing job through some difficult times, as many Caymanians are not finding it easy to get through. And your hard work has not gone unnoticed. I really appreciate it. On behalf of the people of Georgetown Central, we thank you and continue to keep up the good work.
All in favor of EI 54, Ministry of Community Affairs, $150,000 in 2020 and $150,000 in 2021, standing part of the schedule of the bill, please say aye. Aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. Colleagues, that concludes the appropriations to the Minister for Community Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I wish to thank the Chief Officer and the staff in the ministry for all their hard work over the course of a very long time, but particularly in preparation of this budget and getting us through Finance Committee. I also wish to thank, Mr. Chairman, as this is my last ministry to be examined, to thank the staff of, the staff of the other ministries that I have responsibility for, the Ministry of International Affairs, Maritime and Aviation Affairs, the Ministry of Employment and Border Control, the Cabinet Office, and the Office of the Commissioner of Police. Mr. Chairman, there are two outstanding matters for OFREG that we agreed that we would deal with. I don't know if my OFREG folk are here, but I just want the committee to be aware that I have not forgotten about it, and that we will have them back with the answers at a convenient time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank the Premier for those words and also remind him of the opposition's commitment to work with him in terms of looking at this long-term solution. We are also grateful for the work that his ministry plays. It is one that interacts with the public on a daily basis. And I might add, just in my own research, social work is one of those areas that actually have one of the highest suicide rates in terms of different professions out there. So to see them going to see the people in the ministry and the different departments coming to work every day with a smile on their face, knowing the challenges and what it is that they deal with on a daily basis should either be commended. And I think everyone in this house owes them a debt of gratitude for work that they have done. So we also join at the Premier in that regard.
Okay.
Mr.
We're going to allow now the next area we're going to examine is the appropriations to the Minister for Commerce, Planning and Infrastructure. So we'll go ahead and make those changes. I see we have a fairly large group waiting to come in.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah. And I'm going to take a suspension now for 10 minutes to allow us to make these
Mr.
changes.
Chair, if you would allow, on behalf of the Youth Parliament Committee, myself, Barbara, David, and Alva, we want to welcome the youth parliamentarians who are watching the proceedings today, who are doing a little bit of training, getting prepared for Youth Parliament next year. So we want to welcome them, and hopefully they pay close attention to some of the proceedings.
Okay. Thank you and welcome to them as well. So we'll suspend for 10 minutes.